Well, yay. Guys, I'm really happy to see you here on our live session on People First Club. And today I have a very special day because I have a very special guest. And if I have to pick only one thing about remote work that I love the most, that helps to unite people all over the world with a huge pleasure in Ukrainian HR community, I want to welcome our special guest from London, Thomas, Head of People and Talent at Juro.
Hey, everybody.
How are these things with handbook going on? How are the idea actually comes to your mind to make it public?
It's a good question. I think a couple of reasons, because we did we put a lot of work into our handbook. I think a lot of companies tend to do. And we thought that because a lot of people, they ask us about things that they could actually just read themselves that aren't actually sensitive, we thought, why not just make this live, hide a couple of things away that are sensitive, and default to transparency first. And that's really where we ended up. So it seems like this has actually given us quite a boost in attracting talent. So we're like routinely hearing things like, your company does seem more transparent. It seems your values are actually in line with what you kind of write on a flashy page. And because it's through a Notion website, it seems more scrappy, and people tend to actually believe you that this is genuinely like the work of a business, like somebody within a small business, rather than something highly polished that you need, a 3-month project to do. So really has pretty much only upsides.
I'm sharing the Notion file of your handbook also here in chat, so you can follow the link. And actually, the story how I met Thomas started with this transparency. There are other sites, not only for attraction candidates, but also for communities to be open and publicly share their experience. So actually, Thomas sent the link to their handbook, and I found the what was the name? I think career maps there. So it was just so great for such a small company, for the startup actually. So it's like, how many people you have right now? 42 and counting, yeah?
Yes, we have 43 actually as of Monday. So yeah, we're the number continuously gets updated. But yeah, started from 17 when I joined, and then got up to 43.
So I was impressed for such a stage, for such a startup. You have like really good career map, and also what I adore, that the idea, not of the career or just the leveling, but actually the career map, when particular person, particular employee can not just the one path, but there's a multiple opportunities. So I like the idea, and I must say thank you so much for saying yes for sharing your information with our community. And maybe we can start.
Sounds good.
To know how to do that when you have nothing and start from zero and want to build a career map. And by the way, all of us who is with us today online, please don't be shy. Ask your questions here in chat. I'll be there and following them and asking Thomas. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Anna. So hey again, everybody. Really nice to be here. Really appreciate it. So just as a bit of a quick introduction to myself. I'm Thomas. I'm currently the head of people and talent at Juro. The reason why you don't see anything on that slide is because that was supposed to be a GIF/GIF, but I forgot.
Sorry,
my problem. My problem. But you'll find out that I'm from a company called Juro. So I ended up at Juro after being in like people and talent, but especially in like small, fast-growing B2B SaaS startups for the past kind of 5 years. Joined Juro good like 18-ish months ago. As I said, I went from kind of 17 people, like being employee number 17 to now 42 people. We will probably close the year at, say, roughly 55 people. The company that I was at before Juro was a company called Paddle. And there I was part of a team of 3. We grew the team from 35 to 135 in under 10 months. So had kind of a bit of experience of like growing teams like semi rapidly, and also growing teams perhaps a bit more like slower and more considerate. I would say that that's currently the challenge at Juro. My current role mission is really to build a world-class team that's fully enabled to deliver top performance. So you can see in that mission the 2 elements of talent, like attracting people, and then the people side of things, or people ops side of things, which is making that that team then super successful.
Quick question here: do you hire remotely? Can our talents apply to your vacancies?
We do hire remotely, and in fact, we're actually we're a distributed team. So we've got sort of 2 office hubs, but we've got people based in a couple of different countries. So actually, one of my direct reports, Alex, he's based in St. Petersburg. Never met him face to face so far. It doesn't actually make much of a difference, because the things that you see in the handbook, a lot of the processes that we've got, they are all fully remote ready.
Thanks. So guys, listen carefully. Maybe your next dream job will be here with Thomas.
Let's hope so. If you see something that you like on our careers page, definitely go ahead and apply. A bit of quick word on Juro and what it is that we do. So Juro is essentially a contract automation platform. So what we do is we help companies to ditch like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and then, I don't know, using DocuSign to turn like a doc into a PDF, and then making that PDF a little bit editable again, and sending stuff back and forth, turning all of this essentially into a single experience from a browser-based platform. So I'm using Juro myself at Juro for like sending out offer letters, for doing employment contracts, etc. So it's really quite a handy tool if you want to give the candidates, in my case, a smooth experience, and also like employees, if you do like a remuneration review or give them a promotion or something. So it's a really cool product that we're building. We're right now at Series A funding stage. We are probably gonna have raised Series B before the year is out. And that's because we're on quite the sort of unicorn growth trajectory. So we're currently growing 10% month on month. We're closing 1 customer a day, etc. So it's really quite a nice journey to be in. And my role in that when I joined was really to make sure that both the talent engine and also the people engine actually fit for that growth, and then fit for scale. Right now, the like 42 people that we hired, none of these are really repeat hires except for in sales. It's not like we're hiring 20 customer service reps. Pretty much all of these are senior engineers, senior product manager, senior product designer, senior account executive, like marketing executive, leadership roles like director of sales. So it's really building a kind of small team of like a lot of really demanding roles, which means that not only did we have to essentially do like discovery from scratch for all of these roles, but these are also demanding people that have left their previous jobs because they weren't growing, they've left a glass ceiling. But then when they come into our company, they will ask the same question again, which is, how are you actually going to make sure that I am going to grow in my career? Like, what is the plan for me to actually get somewhere else? Like, how can I like get my next promotion, etc. And this is what we then set out with career maps. I'll get to that in a second, but I thought it would be helpful for you to first understand what our company actually looks like in terms of structure. Basically 3 pillars. PDE functions, PDE meaning product design engineering. So that's essentially the whole creation side of the business. Then we've got the go-to-market functions, sales, marketing, customer success. That is sort of the distribution side. So one creates, the other distributes. And then we've got what we call the booster functions. So the ones that make sure that creation and distribution. The red and the yellow work really well, and that is operations, that is people, and that is talent. And I'm leading both people and talent. When I joined, we had pretty much nothing. So we didn't have a careers page in the first place. What's one of the first things that I did was building that out in quite a scrappy way. So our careers page right now lives in Notion. If you don't know what Notion is, it's essentially like an all-purpose kind of internal wiki that you can build to your heart's content, which makes it really easy for me to like change something on the careers page if I want to. And really what that did was it kind of put us on the map as a startup, especially in the UK and kind of Western Europe, but also like in Russian-speaking regions, like Russia itself, like the Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus, also Armenia, where we've got one of our senior engineers. So that's really cool. And then the second thing is recently put that handbook live, which a lot of work went into. And if you scroll down on that handbook, what you will see is a segment that's growing with Juro, and that's got a page in there. It's called Career Maps, which then in itself contains quite a lot on like how we think about growing people at Juro. And the road to get there was arduous, but it was actually not as painful as you might think. And part of this is because we really work quite intensely from first principles when we tackle any problem. So what does first principles mean? It essentially means we work like a product team. Product teams, they do research, they build hypotheses, then they do sprints based on those hypotheses, and then they measure whether they're successful, and they kind of iterate. And that's exactly how I run my team. So we knew that, you know, sort of career maps or like making sort of growth or career growth a little bit better was something that we had kind of a vague idea we wanted to do. But really how we started was to understand, well, what are the problems that we're seeing at Juro today when it comes to people's professional growth? Why was it that we were seeing these problems? And then how can we go about and tackle them? And what is it that we actually are going to do about it? And it's these 4 questions that we basically tackle any problem in the business at Juro. So that goes to career maps, it goes to new benefits, it goes to anything. And the pains that we have seen in the past at Juro, especially in go-to-market functions, so sales, marketing, customer success, was 4 things. People didn't know how they could progress. So they were like, well, I'm an account executive now, or I'm a senior customer success manager. What comes after that? Like, am I gonna get a raise at some point? What would a job title change actually mean? So there was just unclear progression. There was unclear expectations. So people didn't really know what was expected of them in order to get to that next target. Unclear timelines, meaning even if both of the above were clear, they didn't really exactly know when that happens. And then sometimes there was also kind of a long talks, no action. So that was people basically talking with their manager sort of on and off for like a quarter or more about sort of their progression and their next stage. And it was all just a little bit blurry. The bottom line here is people who don't grow leave. So that's a problem, the 4 things on the previous slide, because it risks churn. And you really want to avoid that, especially if you are a team of 40 people, where like 1 person leaving can make a massive difference to the success of your company. So this is really imminently a problem. And from, you know, a lot of you will have like hired before, and you will know that it's going to be really painful if you essentially have your people leave because of the same reason that they left the business before you. So, you know, most of the people that I speak to as candidates, they say 2 things. Like, I want to look for new opportunities because I can't grow anymore, or because the company is toxic, or both of these things. And we want to make sure that we mitigate that. So why do people not grow? There's typically two reasons that we identify. Number one is lack of opportunity. Maybe you genuinely don't actually have something above you, in which case I would argue it is fair for you to look somewhere else if there genuinely isn't room to grow. But more often it is lack of clarity where you can go to. I would think that especially in small, fast-growing companies, there's always an opportunity for you to kind of make a step upwards or diagonal, or even sideways. But there's just not a framework for getting there. So with all that said, like, what is it that we were actually trying to achieve? And by the way, we said all of these things before we ever arrived at the conclusion that what we need is a career map. Like, a lot of companies, they essentially think like, oh, our people are not growing, let's put a framework in place. It might be that you do this kind of like first principles discovery search, and you might find that actually don't need a career framework yet. Maybe you need something lighter than that. Maybe you need something more elaborate, but you really want to work from the problems that you're trying to solve. And the problems that we wanted to solve was 5 things. We wanted to give team members, for now, in go-to-market functions. We're currently actually working on expanding our career maps to product design and engineering, but the process that we're doing this with is exactly the same as I'm going to show in the next few slides. But we want to give people more clarity on where they're at, what is expected of them to get to the next level. Second, we wanted to turn career growth into something continuous. So not just like every year or so you can get a promotion, or every 6 to 9 months you can get a promotion. We wanted people to feel this quarter on quarter. Second thing is making sure that people can actually see this on their own. They don't have to rely on like a manager telling them what's happening. Number 4, making sure that it's actually gonna be easier to forecast on what level to hire people into the business at. So right now, all the roles you see on our careers page, they actually have a level in our career map assigned to them. So like individual contributor level 3 is basically the way that we currently express what an account executive is on our careers page, which essentially makes the hiring process nothing more and nothing less than a leveling exercise. And essentially you're turning like growing people in your company and hiring people into your company basically the same thing, or something that comes from the same source, which is a set of competencies that you want to estimate and then grow in your company. And lastly, we want to also help managers self-serve more. I think when Anna and I spoke in the lead up to this event, I know that a lot of the people listening here, there seems to be kind of this expectation on it is the people team or the HR team that has to like provide progression, which I think was a similar feeling before we did the career framework. But ultimately, this is something that really is on managers, but often managers don't feel equipped to be able to do this. So really what we wanted to give them is something that is so easy that they need to involve like myself as little as possible, because it is just really quite straightforward. I would typically say that if I'm building something that I have to put a lot of energy in order to maintain, I probably haven't built something very good. And I think of the people team essentially putting out the people experience or the employee experience. That's the product that I build, right? And if I have to do a lot of stuff to keep like the employee experience good, I haven't built a good product. Our approach that we ultimately ended up with, and I'm going to go in a second on how we got there in 8 steps plus minus 1, is we went for something we call career maps. So you might know this as a leveling framework, as a growth ladder, or different moniker. There's a reason we went for career maps, but what I really want to say here is that we didn't do anything groundbreaking. There's lots of companies who've done leveling frameworks before. So we had a lot of stuff to build on as well. And we were saying, in order for us to be able to do this within like less than a quarter, we're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We adapted past work that other companies had done to our own principles and created a framework that actually feels true to our values. There's a bit of science that goes into this. and there's a lot of resources out there. Progression.fyi is a very good page for just seeing crowdsourced career maps, so go to that if you want to. The reason we settled on career maps, that's not just like a naming marketing thing, but really for us the thought was that a growth ladder is a very linear thing, right? A ladder typically just goes one way, it goes up. But really what we're thinking is that career growth for a person in a business, especially a young startup, can go into many different directions. And that's exactly what a map is. A map gives you orientation. It doesn't actually dictate where you have to go if you want to achieve something. It indicates lots of possible directions. And what's more, you can actually go off the map. So our career framework, for example, it explicitly gives you the opportunity to build a career track for you that doesn't actually currently exist yet, because we are a company that is still growing. It would be foolish of us to say like you can go like from like a content writer to a content editor and that's it, right? Maybe the person wants to become something slightly different, like a multimedia manager who does like podcasts, if there's a business reason for that. Maybe they want to become a community manager if we're starting to build a community of, for example, in-house lawyers who deal a lot with contracts. So these are kind of the reasons why the naming convention came about. Where we're currently at, we've got a career map with 2 general tracks, individual contributor plus manager, couple of levels, and every single map has essentially a defined subset for each role. There's also a couple of categories, but don't worry about that now. I'm going to go into this in a minute. Essentially, what we have now is this. We have got about 3 career maps for every single area of the go-to-market side of the business. And we will expand that soon with product, design, and engineering. So if you're an account executive or a business development representative or an SDR, you would essentially be on the new business sales map. If you are a customer success manager, you would be under the CS management map. If you are in my team and you were a recruiter or a talent partner, you would be on the talent partnership map. All of that is documented in Notion. If you want to like look it up, you have the link so you can check it out for yourself. But basically what this shows you is typically 3 tables. Table 1 just gives you the various job titles and gives you the levels on the left. We essentially have 5 individual contributor levels, IC1 to IC5, and then 4 manager levels, MN1 to MN4. And we would say that, an IC4, like a senior account executive, is probably as experienced roughly as like an entry level, quote unquote, sales manager, etc. And then you've got essentially every single one of these maps has basically very specifically defined what milestones somebody has to have achieved in order to reach the next level. So you've got the various competencies that we're looking for. Those competencies have 3 categories. We would say exposure or experience, impact, or like what people have delivered, and then collaboration, or how people make others better. So that is the end product that we've gotten to. I'm gonna go into sort of the 8 steps that we got there, and I think those 8 steps are really quite economical, meaning that I think regardless of what size company you are, you should be able to complete those 8 steps in, I would say, if you really put your mind to it, I think 45 days is a relatively good time scale to actually create this. If you're in a larger company, obviously this will change a little bit. But it's really something to make something that you can be proud of and that is solid for kind of a first version of these. And it will probably let you survive, I guess, for sort of about like 18 months. So we probably would say like this thing has an expiration date of like 1.5 years. And we would then say we're going to have to like look at this again in like sort of a year in the future. But the first 3 steps are basically a lot of work with your founder. So for us, what we did is we wanted to, first of all, before like designing role-specific maps, we wanted to make sure that all of these frameworks are actually kind of feeding from one source. And in order to do that, we would need to create an Uber map, essentially. So like one universal like world map is how we call it, that I worked together with our CEO and founder with to create. So first step is the one that I kind of showed you at the very beginning. Define the problem we want to solve and the goals we want to achieve. The outcome of that is just a problem statement. For us, that was like, we want to give people more clarity and help on career maps, and that then fed down into these 5 tangible goals: clarity, self-serve, forecasting, etc. And then what I did is I essentially did 2 sessions with our founder. First session was to dig into, defining the levels and skill groups that we want in our career map in the first place, right? So you start out with pretty much nothing. You have a lot of other companies that have various levels. Some of them have 4, some of them have 5, some of them have 7. Some people have like 2 tracks, like an individual contributor and manager. Some companies I've seen have like 3 that are like individual contributor or like specialist, like a project leader, but not really a people manager. And then the one that's kind of like a people manager. The possibilities are potentially endless. So we essentially did a thing early on where I essentially sat down with Richard, and I started with just 2 very simple questions. Question 1 is like, well, who's the most senior person who doesn't manage people at Juro right now? And he gave me a name. He actually gave me 2 names. And then I said, well, who's the most like entry-level person that you've got in the business right now? And he also gave me a name. And then I essentially said, okay, cool. Now let's sort of fill this in with a couple of more people that you would think are sort of like in between those 2 like extremes. And we filled it out with like sort of like 8, 10 more people. Took us perhaps like 15, 20 minutes. And then we essentially had already like a first hypothesis of how many levels we would need, because we knew the most senior person, we knew the most junior person, and we knew a bunch of people in between. And I just asked our founder saying, okay, like which of these are sort of like, at sort of roughly the same level. And it kind of like came about that there's sort of like 5 levels of seniority that we already implicitly have in the business. And that's an interesting thing to realize. Like most companies, they have a framework already. They just don't define it. Every company probably has like, oh, this is a junior engineer, or it's a mid-level engineer, or it's a senior engineer, or principal engineer. You already have some sort of levels. The question is, okay, like how do these kind of like map against with every department? There's one thing I should also add here, which is that we made a very specific decision in this step, the second one, dig into levels and skill groups, which is that we did not want to make career maps per department first. We wanted to make a universal one first, because there is a reality in which you could say like, we only want to do engineering maps and nothing else. Possible, but will essentially create a 2-class system. You will have that one department that like gets all of the goodies when it comes to career maps, and then other teams who don't get that. It is an easier job to start from like high level and then work downwards from there than start bottom up. At least this is what it was for us. So this is how we got to the levels. We essentially said, okay, for like people who don't manage people and for people who do manage people, we found like this 2 distinction is kind of the easiest thing. We thought a 3rd track would just not make sense. Like you're either like a specialist who doesn't manage folks, or you are a person who is a manager or a leader. It was a little bit more difficult creating the skill groups, which is essentially what is the difference between somebody who is like very junior to mid-level? Like what can one person do better than the other? And you will see probably as many classifications as you see like frameworks. There's like every company has, I don't know, typically like 3, 4, 2 like skill groups. So really the work that we did here was just breaking down into the things that our founder thought are most important for people to have. Because every founder has some sort of idea in their head on like what they want every person to have, like non-negotiables essentially. And what we narrowed it down into was basically three things. It's like the things that you already have done that you bring into the job with you, the things that you have done to like improve yourself, and the things that you have done to make others better. That third thing is essentially something that people put under like mentorship or leadership quality or communication. We settled on collaboration, but it was really kind of, we thought this kind of captured the whole universe of all the skills somebody could possibly bring. They will probably always fit onto stuff you've already seen, stuff that you can do, and stuff that you do that doesn't impact yourself primarily, but does impact others. And then the third step was distilling this matrix into expectations for skills. So this is really, you made the columns, you made the rows, now let's fill those roles. Now let's fill the cells with specific bullet points. So there's a live example which you will be able to see on the on the slides once we share them, so that you can actually see into that thought process. Because this all sounds a bit lofty and a bit theoretical, but I really wanted you to be able to see what this looked like as a blueprint that you could actually copy and paste and like use for yourself if you wanted to. So I've made two public versions. One is essentially a Notion worksheet, let's say, and a spreadsheet that you could use sort of kind of as a blank version for yourself. But ultimately, the first three steps are just like define what you want, then make rows, make columns, and then fill those with some cells.
Just for all of our listeners, not to worry, we'll share the links on the YouTube video tomorrow, so don't worry. Thanks.
Going to steps of 4 to 6. This is really like, this is kind of the second phase of us creating these was, okay, cool. Now we've got like a big map. We like have an idea of what our levels are. We have an idea of our competency, like groups. We have an idea of what's roughly expected at each level. So like somebody's like this good on like impact versus like that good on impact as like an IC2 or IC3. Like our founder put a lot of thought into this, and like credit to him. I should also add that a lot of the work was essentially like me putting out an idea, because I know our founder very well. I know how he thinks. So I essentially typically like gave him ideas, and then he just gave like his thoughts, or like typically like radically reduced the stuff that I wrote, which was quite helpful. But what you then do is you've got this cool thing, you've got like a single map, and that's, by the way, where most companies stop. So most companies, they make like a really good high level framework, and then it's up to every department how they want to interpret this for their own roles. Totally possible to do that. If that's something that that you want to start with, it's totally fine. I think like going this specific into like every single like department is possible, but it might be overkill. So I think if you really want to start very, very small, I think you can like define this with whoever the most senior person is in your business, and then kind of explain it to managers, and then kind of stop at step 6, I would say. But we went a little bit further. So what we did first was we discussed sort of this matrix and why we created it in the first place, how we did it, so that really the managers actually understand what the thinking was behind this. We did this in individual sessions. Step 5 was that was really like the one that probably took the longest. So what we essentially did is we said, okay, you take this blueprint of the like world map, put it on like one side of your screen, put an empty spreadsheet on the other side, and essentially start defining this stuff for yourself. It sounds a bit oversimplified, but this was ultimately 3 sessions I did with every manager. Session 1 was I gave them homework for each of them. So like for the homework for the first session was, given that we have 5 individual contributor levels and 4 manager levels, what would be the job titles that you think should be at each level? And that's typically something that's fun for managers, because they are like, yeah, well, there's people in my team already that are like account executives or senior account executives. And I'm just gonna like, just slot this in a little bit, and like I myself am a manager, and I would probably put myself here, etc. So you essentially leave it up to every manager a little bit to play around and give you a couple of job titles, and then I would use that in the first session to poke holes in it, essentially. So I want to make sure that it means roughly a similar thing to be a senior anything at Juro. So I typically say, well, should somebody really be a senior person at like IC2 level? Because there were some people who gave me like, I don't know, like content associate, senior content associate, content writer, senior content writers. Like, we're not gonna make people seniors and then turn them into juniors. Again, that's like exactly one department in which I think that's accepted, and that's potentially in sales. But kind of went through this, talked through all of it. And then once we had that in the first session, I essentially gave them a second homework, which is that you've now got your columns as essentially filled out, right? You know that an IC2 means an SDR, let's say. Homework for number 2 was, you've got 3 categories. You've got exposure, you've got impact, and you've got collaboration. What have they done? What can they do? How they make others better? So now give me the qualities that are important for you, for a person of this track to have. And to make the job easier for them, I essentially said, here's the job description with which we looked for people before. There's a couple of expectations and requirements on that job spec. Those probably somehow slot into these categories. So managers essentially didn't have to work from scratch, which gives a lot of resistance to managers, because they're like, oh no, now I have to think about this, and I really don't wanna. So what I really tried and do was always give them something to work off of, and saying, job descriptions are really nothing else than trying to slot somebody into this existing systems. A hiring process is nothing more than essentially a test to get to a relatively good certainty that somebody is actually a senior person. So homework for the second session was give me the roles, give me the couple of things that you want, growth mindset, or I don't know, content management, brand consistency, stakeholder management. This is where you get all of these lofty words. But we kind of then did that in the second session. And then session number 3 was the exact same thing as fill out the cells. If you're really sure you know what each of these things mean, you got to make really sure that you know what separates an IC1 from an IC2 in terms of, I don't know, prospecting ability. So did all of that, and ultimately after 3 sessions ended up with a relatively good idea of kind of what progression means for each role. I should add to this that not every single competency or expectation needs to have 5 stages. It might be that somebody doesn't really have anything else to learn under prospecting after level 3. Maybe they've maxed out. So I told them you do not have to fill every single cell. And then once we had that, because that was really the part that took the longest, I think that coming up with all of these was about 60% of the whole work. But then came a bit more fun part. So that's when we said, okay, now you've got your matrix, you've got a couple of direct reports. Give us an estimate where you think every single one of these people is, and how far along they are at in this map. Because what we did is we said every single level, level 2, let's say, has 3 sub-levels. Are you at the start of this? Are you still learning and finding your way into this level? Are you well established in this level? Or are you already really pushing for the next level? So gave them that leveling exercise. I myself also had an idea of where to level them, and then we kind of talked through it together. So we essentially said, okay, you think this person is an IC2. I think this person is an IC1, but upper end. Where are we gonna get to? And that's where we essentially ended up with a list of agreed employee levels. This is how that looked like in a spreadsheet. So we have the people on the far left. I've kind of blocked those out because it's very sensitive. Their department, the career track, the level that people and talent thought that they would be, the level that the manager thought that they would be, the level we ultimately settled on in essentially a fourth, but basically a fifth manager session by that point. Session 1, explain to them the map. Session 2, define the job titles. Session 3, define the competencies. Session 4, make the cells. Session 5, agree on the levels. And then we came to phase 3. But before I go into that, I'll give Anna a question.
Thomas, can you please go to the previous slide? I think the level of self-evaluation and manager evaluation are almost the same, except a couple of points. Yeah. Were there any like differences or conflicts around that when there was like different evaluation? There
were. So luckily, because I think we've done a relatively good job of like making sure that the like Uber map is like sort of the source of truth, and like because I was the like one that worked with every single manager to make sure that all of these maps are aligned, because managers don't know about each other, but like I know about the managers. That meant that we were luckily not having to like argue quite a lot. The one where we did have to argue was actually one of the managers themselves, who essentially thought of themselves as a director, whereas we actually thought they were more of a head of. Which essentially was a problem from us, because like this point of the process is where you notice whether you have people dead. So this is the one where you first start to see like did you give people, like did you inflate people's job titles? Like did you call somebody a VP when they're actually really just like an entry-level manager? So luckily we didn't have that, but we had it a little bit at the manager level. We resolved that ultimately by saying, we're not going to change your job title. That would be really like bad. But we essentially came to the agreement, well, actually, we think that you're kind of at the upper end of like the lower thing. And let's make sure that we have a very specific plan for you to get to the next level, which we did for like every person anyway. But ultimately, it was a bit of a harsh discussion to have. I'm not going to lie. It was essentially like, it essentially ultimately boiled down to, do you genuinely think that you fulfill all of the requirements of this level? And we essentially, because the person made that themselves, they couldn't really like argue with it. So yeah, it was fine in the end, but there was a bit of friction.
Okay, thank you. And one follow-up question, is that leveling is transparent for all the employees? I mean, I know that you are level 4 or level 7, whatever.
Yes, it is. So while people cannot see this exact list, every person knows what level somebody else is at, because the job title is indicative of the level. So like all of our except for this like one case where a director is actually ahead of, everything else it actually like works. So people don't know each other's sub-level. It's a bit very detailed, but people know each other's levels, yes. And you know your own level as well. This is where we get to in like the final phase of this thing.
Okay, thank you. I have one question from chat. Do you assess a person per each competency and then figure out the average level? And this would be the person's level.
It's a very good question. So yes, this is going to be, so like the rat's tail of this slide deck will have a lot of questions that I probably won't be able to like go through all of them, but there's a lot of like very tactical questions that you guys might have that like a lot of them are answered. And this is one of them, which is that there's a person who might be like an IC4 in like one competency, but IC2 in another. So they might have like this weird sort of like coloring system of seniority. What do you do in that case? So here's essentially the one rule that we set. In order to be at a level, you must have all the competencies of that level. Which sounds a little bit harsh in the beginning, but it actually makes sense because first of all, the possibility that somebody will be like an IC5 of like one level, but then IC1 on like all the others is probably relatively unrealistic. So you would be surprised, I guess, how little this sort of like messiness happens. But we had a couple of people who were like IC4 on like one thing already, like IC3 on like sort of half of the other things, and then IC2 on the other half. That person we then ultimately leveled at like the highest level of where they fulfilled all of the competencies, which is IC2. And because we said, well, you're already quite advanced, you're pushing for the next level, that's exactly the definition of like a 0.2. So we essentially set the sub-levels of like 0.0, 0.1, 0.2. So we actually gave that person a 2.2. And there's a reason why we put that rule, is because a person is not going to be set up for success if they are at a level of which they do not fulfill all of the competencies. And that is why we also try to keep the list of competencies relatively narrow. You will see on our careers maps, there's very little maps that have more than 7 competencies. And that's exactly one of the reasons why, because the more you have, the more difficult it is to make that judgment call of the question you were asking.
Yeah, and that's harsh decision with the levels. Thank you so much. We have one question in the chat. Does it mean that in order to be promoted to a certain role, person has to reach up a certain level?
In order to be promoted to a certain role, somebody needs to be able to do all of the requirements of that level, which essentially means that every promotion is reactive rather than proactive, essentially. So basically what this is saying is that a promotion is never a surprise, right? We're not going to put a person into a role that we're not sure they can execute in. It could happen, I guess, in like very select cases. But the standard should be, you're going to be promoted once you have all of these competencies. And actually, pretty much all of our people are completely fine with that, because they're like, I don't want to be in a role where I'm performing really well, then go into another role that I then fail at because, I was promoted into it too early. People actually realize this very intuitively. And then they say like, no, actually, absolutely not. Like, I want to be there no later than, but also no sooner than when I'm ready for it. So actually that rule, even though it might sound harsh at first, actually like it comes across very well to people. But yes, people are going to get promoted as soon as the competencies are at. That's why our career map is also milestone based, not time based. You're not going to have to wait another 2 quarters for like a performance review round or something to come up.
So you can evaluate the competences whenever you want.
Whenever you want, yeah. So usually what we do is we have quarterly career development sessions. We also have quarterly like general like performance reviews. We separate the two because one is really about sort of like your growth for the next 9 months and setting smart actions to get there. The other one is more like, what were your targets last quarter? What are going to be your targets next quarter? But each of these, we essentially do them like the career development sessions, we do like halfway through a quarter. The reviews we do like at the end and the beginning of a quarter, which means that realistically, like a promotion could essentially happen every 6 weeks.
Wow. Thanks. Let's move forward.
Let's get to the final and third phase, which is step like 7 to 9. That's why I said like it's like 8 steps, give or take 1, because the third one is kind of a never-ending step. But phase 1, steps 1 to 3 were like you talk to your leader. Phase 2 was like you talk to all of your managers. Phase 3 is you talk to your entire company. So this is where by this point, by step 7, you have we had an Uber map. We had like maps for every single like function that's currently in the business. And by the way, there's a slight difference between like a map for every role versus a map for like every sort of functional area, because there's business development representatives we have at Juro, and there is account executive. That's just different names for the same career track. We also have what we call a legal engineer. It's essentially an onboarding specialist. And we had a senior implementation specialist. Those 2 roles are also on the same career track, even though the titles are entirely different, which is a bit of a mess, but it worked. So essentially we did have a slide deck and a recorded presentation for communicating this to the wider team. I think on the next slide, no. I think somewhere I also have a link to the presentation that we did to the team, so you could actually copy paste this as well if you wanted to. I made that public. once you've essentially communicated that, what I essentially did is I did a sort of like rundown version of why did we do this? How did we do it? What is it? I answered all the questions. And I essentially said, in the next 3 weeks, every single manager will have a conversation with you one-on-one to tell you what your current level is, why we think you're at that level, and set some initial actions with you on how to get to the next level. And that was what step 8 was. I essentially simultaneously gave managers like one combined training on how to actually do these career development sessions. The way that I did that was kind of in 2 steps. One, I kind of described to them the sort of theoretics on Juro, and you can also see this in our public handbook. There's basically just a 1-pager in Notion that is exactly like a career development structure. It's like, here's how you run these things in 60 minutes. So I gave them like literally a monkey could do this. So I did that. Plus, essentially, I myself with my CEO, who I know does these sessions very well, like did a career development session, and he was essentially the one who sessioned me. We recorded this, and that is available. That's not externally available because that's a bit personal, but essentially every manager can actually see, okay, here's what a good one looks like. If you've got 60 minutes or like 30 minutes, if you put it on 2x speed, here's exactly how to do this. So we essentially we left nothing to the imagination for managers. And then the sort of 9th step is you continuously monitor that managers actually run these sessions. So the way that we do it in Juro is that on Notion, every employee has an employee file. I am one of the very few people that can see all of the files. And these files essentially just have like a table in them where like every single interaction with a manager and their employees recorded. So we can see like one-to-ones, career development sessions, quarterly reviews. So I essentially use this to kind of check in, like, is every manager doing a career development session every quarter? Are they setting smart actions? Are they actually tracking those actions at least sort of like twice in between these like 3 monthly intervals? And I check in with every one of our managers monthly as well to make sure that they actually know what they're doing and don't feel like they're kind of like directionless.
Thomas, one more question from my side. You mentioned Notion, that you're using Notion as a, let's say, HR management system. So you don't have anything on board, for example, Bamboo HR or other tool to manage everything around employee lifecycle.
Good question. So we do use HiBob as our HR system, or Bob. I personally am not a particular fan of using like those HR systems for like performance reviews or for like documenting one-to-ones. Like number one, because you have to pay for it. And as a Series A startup, I try to hack everything before I pay for a tool to do it. So I know that there's Lattice, there's Leapsome, like those are really good tools. Like I've had demos with all of them. I know they're very good if I wanted to get more sophisticated with the stuff. But right now, like my rule is very simple: process over tools. I want a good process first that does it. And then once that process becomes too much to handle manually, then I get a tool to help me automate that stuff. But I think a lot of mistakes that I typically see is people like they want to solve something and they think they get a tool and that tool solves problems for them. It won't. It will probably just add another tool to the bloat. And that's not very good. So like I've got Leapsome. I like Leapsome a little bit more than Lattice right now. But again, it depends on like what's the problem I'm trying to solve once I need to get a tool and how do these stack up. But right now, it actually works pretty well by just having like really good templates that I give to managers in Notion, and they just use those templates. I trained every manager on how to do this, and this works pretty well. And I think it will actually work probably until we're about 80 people before we ever are going to have to think about getting a tool for this. Same thing with engagement surveys, by the way. I just stole what Peakon do because I worked with them before, put it in a Google form, does about like 80% of the job. Not as smart in terms of like, you know, the backend and the like machine learning, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, it does it. And I don't have to spend 10,000 a year to add on to our like people cost.
Thanks for answering. By the way, I think we have like 2 mottos already during this event, like process over tools, and then promotion doesn't have to be a surprise. I want like just to have it in written form and take it on my laptop. Nice.
I might use this for the next iteration of the slide deck to just get a couple of like Twittery sound bites on there. But really, like the second thing, I wasn't aware that this is actually could be a motto, but I mean, honestly, a promotion should never be a surprise. There's 2 things that you as an employee should be seeing from a mile away: promotions and getting fired. Like neither of these should ever be a surprise. You should have like improvement sessions, and like you should be fully aware of how you're tracking against your targets long before you get like let go, and you should be like knowing long before like, you know, when are you due to achieve the things that you need to achieve in order to get somewhere else. And that just takes a lot of the wind out of people's sails as well when they like start looking for another job. Like on top of these career development sessions, one thing that we know of every person, like I can look up for every single person, I could look this up in Notion right now, is what is it that like drives them to be in their job in the first place? Where do they want to be in like a couple of years? Like what are they working towards? Do they want to buy a house? Do they want to start living in Hawaii? Whatever, don't know. Do they want like 5 kids? And what is it that is going to like make them consider leaving if they start ever not getting it at Juro? So that way also for us, it's not a surprise if somebody's going to leave because they've told us what is important to them. And those were typically just like 20-minute discussions where we asked 3 questions. Why are you in your job in the first place? What are you working towards? What's going to make you leave? And we've got a few bullet points on all of these things. So like that's kind of a third thing that's not a surprise, like getting promoted, getting fired, and like they leaving you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Let's take a very quick closer look at these like tracks and like levels and categories, because there's a lot of like words. I just want to just give a bit of flavor on this. So the levels 1 to 5, we gave this the moniker generalist to specialist, because this is really what changes. You essentially specialize more in a thing, right? You focus on building bigger systems. You're getting more trust to build better systems, and you prefer handling projects over handling people. Really what increases as you're an IC 1 to 5 is your influence over the company. So your influence over like the function that is being run. If you're like a super senior like engineer, you're probably owning a relatively big part of the monolith or like a big array of the microservices that you're having. And really it's becoming a thought leader in your role. We typically say like as an IC1, you primarily focus on yourself. As an IC2, you focus on like making sort of like your team better. As an IC3, you focus on your team and other teams. As an IC4, you influence the entire company. And as an IC5, you really influence the whole industry. So this is the people that you see on like LinkedIn that, you know, are like senior account executives, and they are in so many seminars and stuff because they are just like really like wanted at this point. And then for a manager, we think this is going from like lead to leader. And we think about this kind of as the similar idea. So as a manager one, MN1, you would be roughly at the same level as an in terms of like compensation wise or seniority wise, you would be the same level as IC4. But really, as an entry level manager, you're just learning how to manage people. So you're focusing on yourself. And then you're focusing on like making your team better, or like teams of teams, then the company. And then as like an MN4, you are basically like trying to make the entire industry better. We would typically say an MN1 is like a manager or a lead. MN2 is typically a head of. MN3 is typically a director. MN4 is a VP. And then you can go above this. You can go outside and off the map. This is what I said at the very beginning. And you could be like a C-level, like a CMO. A CMO is actually not on our map because this is such a unique role. It's a bit strange probably like to prepare a step where you have to go from like a VP to a C-level. That's a one-on-one like discussion. So that's where we get to. And this is basically everything that I said in one like simple slide. You can go off map, you've got all of these levels, and you've got sub-levels in there that show your seniority. So this is really everything condensed into a nutshell. Then that looks, for example, for new business sales, you've got like BDR, account executive 1, account executive 2, senior, or strategic AE. You can see that this map splits, but what's missing here is arrows in between. So there is a possibility for people to like go from like a strategic AE and IC5 to an MN1 or to an M2 potentially. But the reason, again, why this shouldn't be a surprise is that you should never make an individual contributor just a manager. I think all of us on this call know full well that it's a very bad idea to say, this person's very good at their job, let's give them some people to handle. How hard could it be? Being a manager is a fully different skill set. And the good thing is that we have defined in these maps what it actually means to be a good manager, not just good at like the thing that like you do. You might be a terrible manager, and you want to make really sure that you're prepared to actually be a manager well. The categories, just in case you wanted sort of to know a bit more in detail what exposure, impact, and collaboration means for us, is exposure, it focuses on what you know. Impact focuses on what you deliver. Collaboration focuses on other people. And there are some examples here, but you can look at this by yourself if you want to. And by the way, on the right-hand side, like these sort of EG examples, if you look on our careers page, pretty much like most of our career maps right now just are copy-pasted into job descriptions. So if you're looking for like, ooh, we're looking for a BDR, and here's the requirements that we have, that's literally just taken from our career map. Essentially, I made my job easier by cutting 2 jobs into one. Making a career map helped me speed up the search for a new role because we're looking for the exact same thing. The sub-levels are basically just kind of your seniority. So like going from learning to established to an expert. But I'm going to skip over this one. It's a bit of a like detailed thing. But if you think all the way back to the thing that we wanted to achieve, the like giving people a continuous sense of progression, these sub-levels have a lot of power. So if you're thinking about making a map like this, do not underestimate the power of sub-levels. It's really useful to say, okay, you might not actually make like a big like milestone step from like BDR to account executive until like you're about 12 months into this role. But what is totally possible is for you to come from like just out of uni, know nothing about sales, like IC 1.0 to like a senior BDR in perhaps like 6 months or maybe even 9 months, which means that we actually give people sort of like tiny career progressions or like tiny promotions with like every step. This might not mean that your role changes, but it might mean that you actually move upwards in terms of your salary bracket. So one thing that is quite typical for us, a BDR or like an SDR, depends on which companies you're at, you call it different things, but they typically start out at like 1 salary. We know that an account executive, like an IC2, starts out at like a different salary, but you essentially get like tiny salary increases as you go along. So rather than, these like sort of like one big move, like 10K upwards, we actually do it a little bit more proportionate. And that's because it helps people to grow continuously. So if we go all the way back to what we were trying to achieve, the second slide, with this map, we essentially set out to achieve all of these things. Giving more clarity, that's categories and competencies, fully transparent, even externally accessible. Everybody can see this. Continuous growth, sub-levels. Visibility, you've got the various growth tracks for your roles. They're not just general. So you have visibility very concretely for you. Forecasting, you've got the map. We take the map when we need to hire a new role. We say, what level do we need? We take that, we turn it into a job description. Great. Managers, we have done a lot of training, as you can see, a lot of work with managers throughout. So now I'm quite confident that they can self-serve on all of the stuff. But that doesn't mean the job is done. You've got to iterate continuously. So one thing that I am currently doing is just looking at whether it would make sense to streamline the career maps in between each other a little bit more. We've done this for the managers, by the way. So every single manager at Juro has a small element of competencies that is unique to them, because what a marketing leader needs to do is different than what I need to do. But regardless, both the head of marketing and I, the head of people and talent, we both should be data-driven. We both should be like energizing our team, etc. So, you know, we've kind of streamlined this a little bit, but on individual contributor level, it's very, very different. So, you know, might make sense to iterate this in the future. And this is something that we're taking on board for making this next for product design and engineering. So right now I'm moving through all of this again with our design and engineering managers. This was a lot of information. So one thing that has helped me a lot starting this whole journey was this 3-step blog that I've linked to here by a company called Charlie HR. This was my Bible as I read this. So highly recommend this as a read. And here, as I said, here's like overview of the career maps, a worksheet on how to discover levels with your leader, and then intro slides for communicating this to the wider team in case you want to use this, adapt it, paste it, whatever it is that you want to do. And that's pretty much it from my side. There's a bit of a like long tail here on of FAQ, but rather than going into this, I really want to make sure that there's time for questions, because we're like 2/3 in.
Here, so yeah, we have a question. Do you consider the company has to have an employee on each and every level, or what levels could be left out?
Good question. So yes, in principle, there's a few roles that I would say are okay to be off map. So I would probably say an executive assistant doesn't probably wouldn't expect a leveling system, and it'd probably be a bit overkill. Like, where do you go from like an executive assistant, like senior executive assistant? Maybe. So what you could do if you wanted to, right? Because like, it doesn't matter, an executive assistant is also part of your team and they also want to grow. So if that happened for us, what I would probably do is say, let's do a mini map where we essentially just have like 3 levels rather than doing like an IC and like a manager track or whatever. It's just like give sort of like a, you know, from like IC 3 to 5, but just define that and then have this. But in principle, every full-time employee should, yes. By the way, you can see that this doesn't include contractors, for example, or interns. It's because we don't have any interns, and all of the contractors that we have are actually full-time employees in principles, because we don't have an entity in Russia and there's a bunch of like legal stuff going on with this. But you guys will be familiar with this. But in principle, yeah.
Thanks. Okay, and if, for example, we have a function where there are only 1 or 2 persons, usually to build a career map for them, and maybe there's not a senior leader who can build the map for them. Yeah. Should you do the leveling for them as well? If I were in that situation, so I mean, I was in that situation where, you know, the person above them, like every person will have somebody they report to. The question here is more like, is it a person that knows the function in itself well? Yep. So I would say yes, it's the responsibility of whoever manages them, and even if that person doesn't know the first thing about that role, about that function, they should still create it. They will probably do like not a good job, but it's not the problem of that employee to not have that map. It sounds perhaps a little bit lofty. It sounds like easier said than done, but ultimately you can work off of a lot of what you see on the web. In the case, so it happened to me, and in that case, what I did is I actually connected them with, so this was in marketing, and the person didn't know anything about like content writing or something, but they were like managing the person. So I connected them with somebody that I knew in my network for like 20-minute conversation of like, hey, like I'm trying to like give some progression, like how have you done this? 20-minute conversation. They like wrote some things down. I was protocolling it while I was like listening in on that conversation. Like wrote it down, like set together another half hour after that. We had an initial map that was essentially good enough until like a senior leader came in, who did come in a couple of months ago, and then they just reworked the map.
great. Like that person was happy that they weren't left out, because that's really like kind of not their problem. Honestly, it's yours as a business that you're not giving this level. But also I did it like you want to do it with as little pain and shaming or anything as possible to the manager. So I just gave a little bit of extra support in that case until somebody comes in who does this better. But you, for a company, it might be different. Some people might just say, sorry, we just can't devote this energy. It's like 2 people out of like a team of 150. Are you like okay with us handling this a little bit more ad hoc? And by the way, for this, I also have a template for like, if your person has no level, here's like how you can have a more general career development session. Because honestly, you don't necessarily need a map in order to do progression well for your person. So, you know, that's also there.
Thanks. What about leveling? Do you do the first like exercising the leveling at the very beginning when you hire people? And the follow-up question is, how do you evaluate your way of labeling, for example, your IC2 level, and like somewhere in the market when you hire from another company with another leveling system, you see, oh, in their company, he was like senior already, and like this is IC3 for us. And
ooh, that's a fun one. Okay, so first one, do we level people the second they come into the company? No, that's what a probation period is for. So the interview process is there to have an idea of what level they're at, right? That's what an interview process does. We ask a couple of questions, do a couple of tasks to guesstimate what level they're at. And we stick with that hypothesis for the first 90 days. And after 90 days, that's when we actually say, okay, you've made it out of probation and we think that you're actually at the level that we thought, or if you were lucky, the person's actually higher, and we say, yes, we would say you're currently here. And essentially the first meeting 2 weeks after your 90-day probation is then your career development session where we actually set goals. So that's that on the first. And the second one, if somebody comes in from a company where they're leveled higher. So first of all, I don't care at all what level they're at another company, because that's a different company. And most people, like what we found is that there is people who have what I call golden shackles. So there's people who have insane like salary expectations and think that they're like real hot stuff, when really they're actually like not according to our map, and that's totally fine. Like that's maybe where it doesn't work out. That's why we go through all of this. Like if somebody says like, well, I think I'm a senior and I want to go down from that, and they've got like, I don't know, a year's worth of experience, but they were like put into a senior role and they're still thinking that they can get 70K. They probably can, because there's plenty of other companies out there who don't actually do this like leveling exercise, and they will hire them. And maybe they do particularly well. But for us, first of all, we don't care whether somebody has like a senior job title at another company, especially at like manager or leader level. There's so many people who've got a VP title who really aren't VPs. We also know that our career map is quite demanding. So I'll say that like absolutely, like we are quite demanding of what like an IC4 needs to do, which has perhaps made it a little bit more difficult for us to hire, but not massively so. If in effect, it has actually made our hiring decisions more accurate. So that shows in our churn rate. We basically haven't had to fire anybody, and we have almost not had anybody leave. And pretty much all of our people consistently perform at the level that we need to do, because we do all of this due diligence beforehand. But yeah, like I would probably say if somebody's is a different title, I would typically just ask them, like, how much does a title mean to you? And I'd say very transparently, these are career maps. Based on what I know about you right now, I would probably say we would level you here. Do you agree with that? If the person says, absolutely not, I think I'm actually 2 levels above, I would ask them, well, you know, how would you demonstrate to us that you're at this level? Because right now we've seen this. And then if I can't, then it's not the right fit. And I think that goes for both sides.
Thanks. Another tricky question from my side. Usually when I see the company do the exercises with leveling and just evaluate people first time, they see, for example, let's say IC2 level, and they see amounts of people on board with different level of compensation. So we have the same level, and then have a surprise because there is a pay gap, for example, and someone was too high priced on the hiring, but we don't have a leveling when we hire that person.
Yeah.
Do you have something in place, or do you have some advice to how to handle that?
So do I have something in place? No, because I also made a decision very early on to make sure that the career map is not the same as a compensation framework. These are actually different exercises, and you will my advice, don't try and mash these two together. You will end up in a world of hurt. Making a compensation framework is a different thing entirely. And there's also a very good series of posts. Like there's a three step blog article from a woman called Jessica Hayes, who is the COO at a company called Whereby, who did this exercise, and that would be my Bible for this. So
I shared it in the community. Yeah, that's
highly
awesome.
recommend this. So that is fantastic. But that doesn't change the fact that, yes, you will run into this problem where people are either paid more or paid less than the level that they're actually at. So I solved this in 2 ways. Not entirely, but I got sort of 70% there. First thing that I did is I actually made guesstimated salary bands for every level. So I think I said sort of in UK prices, I think I said 28 to 35,000 annual for IC1, 35 to 45, 45 to 60, 60 to 75, 75 to 90. And then for manager, it's 60 to 75, 75 to 90, 90 to 130. And then the MN4, a VP level, is 130 plus. So I had some general bands so that I could say, okay, do people roughly fit in this? So in this table that I shared before, we saw this leveling agreement. There's actually, I cut off with the screenshot, but to the right, there were people's actual salaries, and I added the salary bands, and I essentially just did a basic formula. It's do people fall in this range or not? So that I could see who's roughly in the green. And anybody who wasn't in the green, I basically picked this up with managers as well. Once we agreed on the levels, okay, there's a discrepancy here. What are we going to do about this discrepancy? There's 2 cases. One, people are underpaid or people are overpaid. For people who are underpaid, we made a relatively easy decision, which is, should we pay all of these people more? And we were in the very lucky position that our founder said, well, yeah, they should be. Now is the time. Because otherwise you're just going to rack up that debt. I realize that might not be realistic for companies. So there's a softer approach where you say, okay, let's see if let's add this to our forecasting for the next 9 months to get people there roughly. We didn't share that. We don't share the salary bands, by the way. We did share it with managers. We don't share it with people because salary different extra. For people who are overpaid, that's a tough one. Basically, what we ended up with is kind of the 30% I didn't solve. For people who are currently, I think, overpaid in the business, there's really only one person who I think, well, 2 people who I think are genuinely overpaid. For both of these, we simply said that we just won't give them big raises if they move a level up. So we essentially said we would just kind of minimize this as we get to it. But because we're such a small team, it doesn't add a lot of pain to our benchmark at the minute. But that is an unsolved thing for which I don't really have advice other than be prepared for having a framework with exceptions. This will be the rule 80% of the time, but there is an element of you need to essentially fit a framework onto your people, and there will be some friction that you will maybe leave unresolved for an element. I set that expectation in the beginning with our leadership, so they were this is expected, right? So there was never an expectation, is this going to be perfect and solve all our problems? I always thought it's not going to, what it's going to do. This is version 1 of a career map that we're going to build on.
Thank you, Thomas. I think one interesting slide moving forward. Maybe you can show and agree with them, because I have a couple of questions around. It was about levels and review cycle. I think next.
Hold on. Next. Yeah, review cycle. How to reach the next level? How long will it take me to progress?
Oh, this one.
This one. Okay.
Oh. So, like, again, could you please start when you just join the team, when you finish the probation period? Just explain the system, how it works.
Yeah. Okay. So here's essentially
I'll move the bubble here to.
Yeah, cool. So the like graphic below this like timeline essentially shows you in like one snapshot what 1 year with Juro looks like. Is this thing. So this is in like 4 like 3-month increments, so like 4 quarters. Let's say somebody started in like May 2021, for example. So the first 90 days, that is your onboarding period. We don't see onboarding as like the first 2 weeks. We see onboarding as synonymous with probation. So in that time, that's where your like leveling essentially takes place. So it's 90 days to see, are you gonna like, do you meet the targets that like we set, etc. By the end of that first gray block on the left, like the first gray band, you will then get your actual leveling. In that block, you have, this is actually not entirely correct. You actually have weekly one-to-ones with your manager, not monthly one-to-ones, but I realize that that's quite unrealistic for some companies to have like weekly one-to-ones, especially if they're larger and can't afford this. So monthly one-to-ones, fine. That's when then sort of the actual review cycles come in. So it's like 3 month, 3 month, 3 month. And in every single review cycle, there is, I'm going to actually turn on, I think is there a whiteboard function? Ooh, hello. Okay. So in this cycle, there is essentially weekly one-to-ones, or in your case, perhaps monthly. Halfway through is your first career development session. So this is essentially like 6 weeks after sort of the like first leveling exercise. Then here is your quarterly review. Again, career development session, quarterly review, career development session. And then there's for us like weekly one-to-ones in between. So this is essentially how it looks. For us, every person has a weekly one-to-one, quarterly career development session, quarterly performance review. We say ideally like every month, the one-to-one, like one-to-one should be a bit longer to essentially check in against the smart actions that you set in your career development session and your progress against your quarterly plan. So essentially, new quarter started in July. The next one-to-one I'm having with my direct report this month, like this Friday, will be to say, okay, here's the targets that we set. You are supposed to make 6 hires. Like, how are we doing against that? And I separately pick up, here's the 5 smart goals that we had in order for you to turn from an IC3 into IC4. How is that going? Where are you blocked? What can I help you with?
Thanks for sharing. And by the way, for example, if you have this 3 months review cycle and you have like quite a lot of meetings, what is the length of the meeting?
So the quarterly reviews typically are 60 minutes. The career development sessions also 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. One-to-ones are for us like half an hour to 45. And we typically find that if managers have a template to run these sessions with, which they do, and which you guys can also copy paste if you wanted to, it's enough. So let's say the career development session, we typically spend about 15 to 20 minutes on like people's motivation. So, you know, what is it that you want? What's going to make you leave? How has that changed? How have we stack up? Then the remaining 40 minutes are essentially like 20 minutes to review like your own map. So we talked before about like somebody's like IC4 here and IC2 here. So essentially looking at this sort of like colored map again and say like, where has somebody like moved on, like in a chessboard, and then the remaining 20 minutes to set smart actions to say, which of these are we going to focus on? You're never going to focus on all like 7 or 8. Typically just pick 3. Pick 3 that you want to work on, the ones that are potentially like lowest, and then work on like, what are like 3 to 4 things that we can do to move these things up. Review again in like 3 months.
Thanks. Okay, I see that we have 5 minutes left, and I have one more question, guys. If you're still alive here with us, you can also write your question in chat. So my question is about calibration. At what time, or maybe at what size, I might say, you need that process when you can, for example, one manager can put the levels, like always trying, like, being harsh with his team or her team, and then like don't evaluate people correctly, or just don't promote people. Do you have like some kind of calibration, or do you think it's something you have in place for future? Or you don't believe in that process as well at all?
Just to make sure I understand this. So like essentially calibration for if things don't go as planned. So like you have a manager that just mislevels their people constantly, or
I've heard about calibration system, for example, in Grammarly, in Facebook, or another like quite big companies. When managers like they have a list of people they want to promote to the next level, they have a calibration meeting when the different managers meet to each other and say, okay, here is John, he will be IC3, and here is Maria, she is also IC3, but when Maria is not IC3, so let's discuss like that. Maybe just to make all these promotions the same with the company as it grows. Very
good. That's a good one. So for now I'm essentially assuming that because we had like one like Uber map first, of which all of the specific maps are born, that essentially means that the will of our founder, of our CEO, is kind of in all of these maps, because he said in the first place what an IC4 is, and then every person just kind of like said that. You will never be able to have like an IC4 be like exactly the same sort of expectation across businesses, or like across functions. You won't be able to do this. Are we currently doing one where like managers meet each other and kind of like calibrate whether like their seniority works against each other? Not yet. I do know that Grammarly like does this, and yeah, other companies definitely as well. Would I do it right now? Probably not at our size, because we're so small and managers are just really quite on it with like their few reports that they have. I don't think it's necessary. That will change in 18 months. So that's why I'm like saying like iterate. So I would probably say like mid next year, that is when I will probably say, okay, let's look at where people are now, and let's just sort of compare these against across functions and see whether they are there. Not before then.
Thanks. 1 more minute left, and one more question from my side. The last one, the last but not the least. When you go to a technical path, when you go right now to build the career map to all the allowing for your engineers, what I've been actually thinking about that, usually in what I see, especially in a company and service company here in Ukraine, that they build sophisticated matrices. Well, for example, SQL level and algorithmic approach. I don't know, every technical skill, like just like breaking down to matrices of like 20 items or 30 items or even more. What's your approach to the technical evaluation? I'm getting this hard skills here.
No, it's very fair. I'm getting this at the moment because like put brutally, like engineering managers have this feeling that their teams are completely different from like it's like so unique. It's a bit human. It's a tiny bit of arrogance. So the way that I handle this conversation is typically like, okay, fair enough. Like, yes, of course, you're like how you build your teams is different in the sense that there is more hard skills that you assess, right? With sales, there's typically more hard targets, right? You have to hit a quota or something. And there's already a parallel here, which is like in engineering, you just need to have like very specific hard skills. Totally cool. I typically ask 2 questions. Like number 1, would you be able to tell me the like difference in SQL like skill level between like an IC2 and an IC3? Like, can you actually make such a like small distinction? Or perhaps, you know, it's like, would you say it's actually sort of like, I can tell like a junior from a mid-level from a senior, but like not as small as that. Okay, interesting. That doesn't actually mean that we need to change the map. We can say like an IC like 1, like an IC2 is sort of roughly the same level, and then like 3 and 4, and then like number 5, let's say. So I kind of handle this sort of like bit by bit, where I say, fine, if you need to have like 13 different competencies for like all of their like various tech knowledge, cool. I typically find that it actually isn't that much, because yes, you have a lot of different like hard skills and different like languages that you can do, but typically people like just like switch out like modules in the map, just like Lego. So it's basically just like React or Vue or Meteor.js, like, or whatever. It's like regardless of which one, you need to be at some seniority. And I typically haven't then found a lot of friction. So I essentially start with like, yes, I understand it's different in engineering, but also that isn't necessarily contra to the map that we've got. We simply use the existing framework and just adapt it to your needs. And that has worked well so far. I'm about like halfway through.
I'm looking forward, and I will be, bring you the page every week, and looking forward to see your handbook updates with the technical paths and all the technical career maps as well. I'm impressed with the presentation. I'm impressed with the way of transparency you have in your company, that the value we have as well in our Your First Club, in our community. So from all the community and from all that HR and people operations, team leads and recruiters, for all of the maybe founders who will be listening to us on YouTube, please think about transparency. You may win at least in hiring approach, or at least in attracting your people and sharing your values. Thank you so much, Thomas. How are you? How do you feel at the end?
It's the first time that I've actually spoken about this externally. So as you can tell, I went into a ton of detail. But the one thing that I hope is that it helps people whoever watches this, wherever, that they've actually gotten some like tangible links to take away from this, to say, I don't know where to start, but here is what I could be doing. So happy to share those links like at the bottom in the description of the YouTube video as well, so anybody can profit from it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone who were with us tonight. And I wish you a pleasant evening, and stay tuned for the future events in our community. Thank you so much. Goodbye.